Ex-tropical cyclone Lincoln brings much-needed rainfall for drought-stricken farmers, but the deluge was too much for some. Donald Trump barrelling towards his third Republican nomination for US president, winning a crucial vote in South Carolina. A show of solidarity from Western leaders as Ukraine marks 2 years since Russia's invasion. And WA continues its cricket domination, winning the Marsh Cup for a third year in a row. Good evening, Briana Shepherd with ABC News. Ex-tropical cyclone Lincoln has bucketed down on drought-stricken areas in WA's northwest to the relief of many local farmers. The system crossed north of Carnarvon as a tropical low after being downgraded from an expected Category 2 cyclone.
After a year of drought, finally rain. Almost 80 millimetres fell around Carnarvon overnight as ex-tropical cyclone Lincoln swept through the town. Emergency services were at the ready, but the fallout was much tamer than anticipated.
Best case scenario last night, we got some rain, which the community is obviously going to be quite pleased about. It's had some localised impacts, but you know the resulting work that's come from that is moderate because of the preparation work that was done.
Carnarvon's known as the food bowl of the northwest. Farmers were on edge before the storm, but today they're celebrating.
We were watching the radar come down and it basically turned into a massive big thunderstorm instead of a cyclone. And we were just, oh yes! We were wrapped.
The rain's really welcome and it came along with no wind, so it's probably the best result we could have asked for, really.
Some got more than they hoped for. Watermelon grower Sue Tran says record-breaking heat last week and now flooding have destroyed almost $100,000 worth of crops and infrastructure.
Yeah, I feel sad now. Yeah, very hard for the girl look like me.
As the storm tracked inland, some cattle producers saw more rain in a single night than they did the entire of last year, some areas receiving more than 100 millimetres. But areas further north of Carnarvon missed out on the expected rain, leaving many in the region stuck in an ongoing drought. Michelle Stanley, ABC News, Carnarvon.
Donald Trump is marching towards the Republican nomination for president after a resounding win in a crucial primary. The result was declared just minutes after polls closed in South Carolina. His challenger, Nikki Haley, has vowed to stay in the race, but looks unlikely to stop Mr. Trump from securing the nomination.
Please welcome the next president of the United States.
Notching up another victory.
This was a little sooner than we anticipated. It was an even bigger win than we anticipated.
Voters in South Carolina apparently undaunted by the slew of criminal charges the former president is facing.
I know where Donald Trump took us in the last 4 years of his term and decided to go back that direction. So.
One exit poll of 2,000 voters here finding more than 60% would still support Mr. Trump, even if convicted of a crime, with a similar percentage doubting Joe Biden won the previous election.
We're Trump supporters, right?
Both of us, yeah.
Always have been? Always have been, yeah.
Nikki Haley found some support on her home turf, performing a little better than polls had predicted.
Yeah, I voted for Nikki Haley. Donald Trump is a crazy person.
She's the person for the job.
But it wasn't enough. The state's former governor defiant nonetheless.
I'm not giving up this fight when a majority of Americans disapprove of both Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
Nikki Haley vowing to continue fighting, at least until Super Tuesday in early March.
So much of that decision is about, You know, what does the money look like? Do you have enough money to keep going? You know, does she feel like she's making an important case? Maybe she's thinking about kind of what's going to happen in 2028 or 2032.
Behind the bravado, there's disappointment for Nikki Haley. This loss in her home state, further proof of the grip that Donald Trump has on the Republican Party.
Probably time for her to move out. I think it's time for the party to unite.
Nikki Haley has done just enough here to fight on a little longer.
We love you all. God bless you all.
Against what increasingly feels like the inevitability of Donald Trump's nomination. Barbara Miller, ABC News, Charleston, South Carolina.
Ukraine's president has called on his country to keep fighting as the nation marks 2 years at war with Russia. World leaders, soldiers and civilians stepped out to pay their respects to the fallen on the anniversary as Ukrainian troops prepare for another tough year on the front lines.
Bullets are flying, smoke grenades are going off. Ukrainian troops are on the move and the enemy is close by. But today, this is only a training exercise. These soldiers are finishing a 6-week course in the UK.
Now I'm training here, but from the first days of full-scale invasion, I was on the front line.
This is taking place at a secret location in the east of England. It's being led by Australian soldiers who are involved in a multinational effort to upskill Ukraine's troops.
The skills that are being developed and for the armed forces of Ukraine members are things from small arms training with their individual weapons, first aid and care of the combat casualty, and tactics training in rural, urban and trench environments.
The Australian approach to combat marksmanship is really powerful, really strong. And I think particularly if you look at the nature of trench warfare, where a lot of that fighting is really up close and visceral, really good weapon handling and effective combat skills is absolutely vital.
It's a poignant moment for many here as they reflect on the 2-year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion.
I really miss my family, but the things we do so our children do not have to handle this in future, so they don't see all this pain.
About 35,000 Ukrainians have been trained here in England since the 2022 full-scale invasion, ranging from ordinary civilians with no military experience to more senior soldiers who are learning how to be leaders of their battalion. Some here are heading home for the front line. Ukraine is entering its 3rd year at war in a difficult position. Russia occupies about 1/5 of its territory and Kyiv needs more financial aid, weapons and ammunition.
Any normal person wants the war to end, but none of us will allow Ukraine to end. That's why to the words end of war, we always add on our terms. That's why the word peace always goes with fair.
Western leaders, including the Canadian and Italian Prime Minister, were in Kyiv in a show of solidarity. Around the world, the Ukrainian diaspora and their supporters marked the 2-year milestone. Soldiers remember their fallen and vow to fight on for victory. Isabella Higgins, ABC News.
There's still no sign of the bodies of Luke Davies and Jessie Baird, 2 days after a New South Wales police officer was charged with their alleged murders. As detectives widened their search from Sydney to Goulburn, some 200 kilometres away, the Police Commissioner appealed to the community for patience.
Bag after bag, police collect more evidence from an eastern Sydney home, the scene of an alleged double homicide. Today's seized items fill a car boot, but police still haven't found Jessie Baird and Luke Davies.
My wife and I actually ran into Jessie and Luke only a week or so ago, and they both seem so happy, in love.
It was at this terrace, rented by Jessie, that police found a large volume of blood and a bullet on Wednesday. Ballistic testing allegedly revealed it came from a police firearm. On Friday, Constable Beau Lamar Condon, Jessie's ex-boyfriend, turned himself in at Bondi Police Station and was charged with 2 counts of murder. Detectives say he's offered no assistance in locating the bodies. The investigation has taken police from Sydney up to Newcastle, and today they expanded their search south to Goulburn. Questions are expected to be raised about the force's firearms policies and mental health assessments of officers.
No doubt that police investigation and subsequent investigations will put forward recommendations, if they are needed, to change in the way in which we operate in that space.
Should it surface that there's additional needs and additional demand, then of course we'll consider that on its merits.
Dozens of mourners have left flowers for the couple outside Jessie's home in Paddington. The police commissioner is urging the community to be patient as detectives try to determine exactly what happened to the 2 young men.
This happening right around Mardi Gras, when it's a celebration of gay life, it just hits that much harder.
The most difficult thing is just to comprehend what has actually happened, and especially at the moment as well, not knowing where Jessie and Luke are.
A shaken community desperate for answers. Helena Burke, ABC News, Sydney.
The biggest university reforms in a generation. That's what's been proposed by a government review of the sector released today. Everything from research funding to more than doubling the number of students on campus has been proposed, but the government is yet to commit or reveal how they'd pay for it all.
Jade Smith always loved learning, but grew up thinking the ivory towers of university life were out of reach.
The idea of university was something that was really unattainable and quite fantastical to some degree. I didn't know anyone who had been to university.
The campuses of the future may not be so lonely. The government's proposing meeting Australia's skills challenges by lifting the number of university places available from 860,000 today to 1.8 million in 2050.
In the decades ahead, we need 80% of our workforce, not just to have finished school, but to have gone to uni or to TAFE.
With equity targets to ensure more new students are from poorer backgrounds, regional areas and First Nations families.
We've got to smash down an invisible barrier that stops a lot of kids from poor families and our outer suburbs and the regions from getting a crack at university in the first place.
Education charities welcome this, along with potential changes to student debt and extra support to help new students adjust.
We'd love to see that sort of support embedded in campus.
That is what this is all about.
There's plenty of homework to be done to find a way to pay for the 47 recommendations in the 400-page report.
This is bigger than one budget. This is a plan not for the next few years, but for the next few decades.
I think what it really reveals is that higher education in Australia has been chronically underfunded now for decades.
While many universities welcomed the plan, a proposal to have the wealthiest campuses pay $5 billion in tax to contribute to less well-off institutions drew an immediate backlash from the leaders who'd be forced to cough up.
I think it's odd that the revenue measure would be to tax the universities that have been starved of funding. The system needs more money.
Back on campus, Jade Smith is gearing up for her masters and would love to see more inclusive campuses.
It's been an incredibly fantastic experience.
Sandstone for all. Connor Duffy, ABC News.
The body of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been returned to his mother following his sudden death in prison last week. Family and supporters had been fighting to have his body released, even visiting the remote facility where he died. A spokesperson for Mr Navalny says it's not yet known whether authorities will allow a funeral to be held as people continue to lay flowers at memorials. The Russian opposition leader died of unexplained causes in an Arctic penal colony where he was serving a 30-year prison sentence. US and British forces have carried out airstrikes on more than a dozen Houthi targets in Yemen. The Pentagon says the strikes are directed at underground weapons, missile storage facilities and air defence systems. It's the latest round of fighting against the Iran-backed Houthi group, which continues to attack ships in the Red Sea in support of Palestinians in Gaza. Almost daily strikes by the US alone have so far failed to halt the attacks, which are disrupting global supply chains. As debate rages in Canberra over how to tackle Australia's housing affordability problem, rental prices continue to surge. But what sparked the current crisis, and are there signs of improvement? Here's the ABC's Alan Kohler.
Something very significant happened in March 2020. Yes, that's when a virus named SARS-CoV-2 came to town and Australia went into lockdown like most of the world. But something else happened at the same time that, unlike COVID, has not faded. The growth rate of rent across the country went from 2% a year to 9.1%. Why? What happened in March 2020 to cause a rental crisis that's still with us? Well, it was three things, one after the other. First, average household size dropped dramatically because share houses virtually disappeared because of COVID. That meant that even as immigration stopped, the need for housing didn't decline. Flatmates.com reports that share housing is bouncing back, with an 11.2% lift in membership in the past month. So maybe that will take some pressure off this year. Second, immigration then bounced back dramatically to be double what it was before the pandemic. And third, when interest rates started shooting skywards in 2022, property investors bailed out. That is, negative gearing, deducting mounting losses against other taxable income, wasn't enough to keep them in the game. The result was that the national rental vacancy rate collapsed in March 2020 and didn't recover. And while the national increase in rents last year was 9%, that's just an average. Some suburbs saw truly horrendous increases. The top 4 suburbs in Australia increased by over 50%. The thing about rent is that it's not what economists call discretionary spending. If you don't pay the rent, you're homeless.
A mystery shipwreck found off the New South Wales coast has been confirmed to be a missing coal ship which sunk in a freak storm 120 years ago. The SS Nemesis was carrying coal and 32 crew from Newcastle to Melbourne in 1904 when it ran into bad weather. Fragments of the ship and some bodies washed up on Cronulla Beach in the days after, but the hull was never found. A private company searching for lost shipping containers discovered the underwater remains 2 years ago, 26 kilometres off the coast of Wollongong. New South Wales government heritage experts have now confirmed it's the SS Nemesis and want family members of the crew to come forward.
This ship, the Nemesis, the story, had everything. It had drama and gales, tragic loss of life, and then the mystery from all those years of what happened to it. Now that it's found, that's of interest itself. For the families that can connect their family histories to events like this, it gives them a focus.
Most Australians don't have to think twice about getting from A to B. But for people with disability, using transport services requires meticulous planning and things often go wrong. Fed up with what they see as a lack of action, some have taken matters into their own hands. Advocates are calling for decision makers to make accessibility reforms more of a priority.
I've had trains drive off here.
Been dropped off in a place where it took me 3 hours to get back home.
We feel disrespected. We feel like a second-class citizen.
These are stories from people trying to get on with life. The ABC has heard hundreds of accounts from people with disability struggling with transport. They want you to know that it doesn't matter what disability you have, the mode of transport you take or where you live. Getting around is harder than it should be.
Neil Furs became a quadruple amputee after contracting meningococcal. Transport's been difficult for Neil to navigate, including on a family trip to Malaysia last year.
Halfway through the plane trip, the hostess came up and said, "We don't have a tube for you to get off the plane." So the option was that I would be carried down the steps.
The same thing happened arriving back in Melbourne, only this time safety laws prevented him from being carried off. The family were left on board for 2 hours after other passengers disembarked, as the airport scrambled to find a solution.
I was pretty disappointed in the administration. For God's sake, they should have done something quicker about it.
In a statement, Melbourne Airport said it has been upgrading its facilities, but admitted more accessibility improvements could be made. Advocates say transport systems as a whole have been letting people with disability down.
It fails because there's poor services, there's lack of consistency throughout, not just buses, taxis, aviation, trams.
All levels of government hold responsibilities relevant to air travel. Public transport sits with the states and territories, though the federal government sets accessibility legislation for them to follow. A review into the aviation sector is underway, while an audit of public transport accessibility standards is currently with ministers. People with disability want them applied and strengthened.
If those standards aren't complied with and not enforced, what's the point of having them?
The federal government says there has been improvements in accessibility and investment in recent years, but concedes people with disabilities still face issues. It says it's committed to listening to the experiences of people with disability to further tackle discrimination. Meanwhile, some people with disability are taking matters into their own hands.
12:34 a.m. Oh, so 1 minute and we're 3 minutes early. OK, that's cool. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Santiago Velasquez is blind and an electrical engineer. He's created an app he hopes will help. Halo would allow people to notify a bus or train driver about their pick-up and drop-off locations and what supports they have, such as a ramp. That information then goes to the driver via an alert, so the user doesn't have to advocate for themselves.
The best impact that we're aiming for with Halo is to give people the ability to do whatever they want, whenever they want. Straight.
Santiago developed the app after a frustrating incident on the way to university.
I wasn't able to sit an exam because a bus left my guide dog and I behind. I arrived late. They said, it's too late. You got to repeat this unit. Sucks to be you. List.
The 27-year-old is in talks about trialling his app. His message to transport services everywhere is simple.
Transport should work for everybody, right? That's the whole idea behind it. It's public transport, and it shouldn't be hard.
A cow has delivered a surprise package on WA's south coast, giving birth to 3 calves. While the chances of all 3 surviving are slim, their mother, a 4-year-old Angus cow named Angel, has beaten the odds.
When Shane Marsh was checking on his calving cows last weekend, he found an unexpected gift.
Come on.
The 4-year-old mother had produced a rare miracle.
But 1 in 105,000 pregnancies conceive triplets. Come on. Since these have been born, I've had a lot of people tell me they've seen or heard of people that have had triplets, but they don't get them all to survive.
Cows don't always accept twin calves, sometimes rejecting the weakest. So her acceptance of all 3 is extraordinary.
She wasn't assisted at all, had the 3 of them one after the other, and and just cleaned them up like normal and took them all immediately. There was no hesitation.
1 week on, the 2 sisters and their brother are thriving.
The night before she calved, we were joking about her having triplets.
While to Shane, she's just cow number S53. His daughter calls her Angel.
And then the little bull's name is Volt, and then the tan one is Violet, and the little black heifer is Viola.
All starting with the letter V to identify the year of birth. Shane is quietly thrilled with the special birth.
It shows a lot of work I put into breeding as many cattle as I can. So yeah, very proud of it.
She may be an angel, but
probably won't get a lot of special treatment. She'll go in her own paddock, probably with others that have twins.
Tough love for a miracle mum. Mark Bennett, ABC News, Walpole.
And now to Tom Wildie with sport. And Tom, it was a three-peat of another kind in the cricket.
Less cute, but just as significant, Bree, with Western Australia winning a 3rd straight domestic 50-over title, overcoming batting wobbles to comfortably beat New South Wales by 5 wickets in Sydney. The Blues were put into bat and looked on track for a competitive total before losing their final 7 wickets for 38 runs to be bowled out for 169. Ollie Davies made 51 and Moses Enriques added 32, while Joel Paris was the pick of the bowlers, taking 4 for 21. WA's chase started shakily, slipping to 3 for 30 before Josh Philippi and Hilton Cartwright steadied the ship. Cartwright hitting this massive 6 to win the game as he made an unbeaten 73 to be named player of the match. It's the first three-peat since the Blues achieved the feat in the early 2000s.
I think we've used over 20 players this year, and there's so many guys back home that deserve to be here. It really does take a whole squad to win a trophy, and it doesn't happen every day, so let's enjoy this one.
Australia has beaten New Zealand by 27 runs in a rain-interrupted game in Auckland to complete a clean sweep of the men's T20 series. Travis Head made 33 as Australia posted 118 off 10.4 overs. New Zealand was chasing a revised victory target of 126 but could only manage 3 for 98. Australia won the series 3-0 and will now prepare for the first test, which starts on Thursday.
It's a bit of a strange game with the rain, off and on, so we knew, the aggressive way is the way we want to play, especially T20, and sort of make the most of the shorter boundaries here, so it was a good day.
Perth Glory has extended its A-League men's unbeaten run to 6 games with a hard-fought 0-0 draw against ladder leaders Wellington in Perth. Both sides struggled to find any clear attacking options, each recording just 2 shots on target. The Phoenix almost snatched a winner in the closing moments, but were denied by an excellent Ollie Sale save. The result moves Perth into 9th on the ladder, 7 points off a finals berth. West Coast's preparations for the AFL season continue to be hit by injury, with another young Eagle struck down in last night's pre-season loss to Fremantle at Lachlan Park. Ruck Matt Flynn didn't play after suffering a hamstring injury before midfielder Ruben Ginbey suffered a concussion during a head clash. The Dockers were the better side all night as they recorded a 52-point win, with Nat Fyfe enjoying a successful return to the midfield and its forward line firing. Both sides travel to Adelaide next week for the AFL's official pre-season round, with West Coast playing the Crows and Fremantle facing Port.
If you look across the AFL, there's guys, all sides that are losing injuries throughout across the board, and we're going to continue to keep training the way we want. We've got to keep pushing the line and keep getting better.
We'll use next week as a proper hit out towards round 1. You would have noticed there's a lot of guys managed today.
Townsville Fire has finished the regular season on top of the WNBL ladder after beating the Sydney Flames 90 points to 78. Michaela Roof starred for the defending champions Townsville with 22 points and 9 rebounds. Sydney's loss meant that it missed out on the finals at the expense of the Perth Lynx, who beat Bendigo yesterday. They will meet Townsville in the semi-finals after sneaking into 4th. And Bryce Cotton has become the 3rd Perth Wildcat to win 6 club MVP awards, capping off a week which also saw him named the NBL MVP for a 4th time. Cotton was hot favourite for the award and finished well clear of second-placed Keanu Pinder in the voting, with import Kieran Doolittle 3rd. The American joins Ricky Grace and Sean Redditch as a 6-time winner of the Gordon Ellis Medal. He was also named Players Player of the Season.
Just the fact that we're still in season, I won't reflect just yet, but the second it's done, I'll take a good reflection on, basically how crazy of a year this has been.
And Australian Jordan Thompson has won the Los Cabos Open in Mexico to claim his first ATP title. The 29-year-old upset the world number 12 Casper Ruud 6-3, 7-6. The victory will see Thompson rise to a career-high ranking of 32. And Bree, that is the latest in sport.
Thanks, Tom. Well, it was much cooler than expected for the city, with some rain about as well. Right now in town it's 22 degrees and humidity is 76%. Perth dropped to 20 degrees shortly after 6 o'clock this morning, rising to a top of just 23.5 around 1:45. Cooler today across much of the south. Manjimup, Shannon and Rocky Gully South all recording the lowest minimum of 14 degrees. Telfer with the state's highest maximum of 45. Clouds streaming south from the Gascoyne in a broad trough triggered by the remnants of ex-tropical cyclone Lincoln is bringing rain and storms to the west and south. Cloud over the Kimberley is also triggering showers and storms. A low pressure trough is developing offshore from the west coast, whilst a high pressure ridge builds to the south. That trough then expected to move eastwards during tomorrow and Tuesday. A quick look at the country's capitals for tomorrow. Some cloud about for Adelaide and Canberra. A possible morning shower for Melbourne. Cloudy and cool in Hobart. Some possible showers for Sydney and Brisbane, with showers and a possible storm set for Darwin. Back to WA and in the north, very hot over the interior and inland Pilbara. Possible showers and thunderstorms over the Kimberley, central and eastern Pilbara and interior, extending across the southwest and northeast Gascoyne, into the central wheat belt, northeast Great Southern, inland southeast coastal district and western goldfields. Possible showers about the remaining southern southwest land division. In Perth, mostly sunny, a top of 32 after an overnight low of 20. Sunrise will be at 3 minutes past 6, setting at 2 to 7. And looking ahead, a mostly sunny top of 29 on Tuesday before it's set to slowly heat up again, a top of 36 on Friday. Tops of 34 for next weekend with some possible Saturday showers. And that's ABC News. You can stay up to date with ABC News Online or catch up anytime on ABC iView. Bye for now.